I get to introduce our keynote speaker. Got a chance to meet him yesterday at the cocktail. I was very, very honored. I follow him on Twitter. His Twitter handle is Asemota. He's very knowledgeable about technology. He got some very great opinions. Oh, by the way, you should also follow FirstBank on Twitter as well. FirstBank NGR, and also on Instagram, FirstBank Nigeria. But you should check out Mr. Asemota because he's got a whole lot of stuff to say. Very honored. Mr. Victor Asemota, founder, Swifta Systems and Services. He's going to be taking us through the theme. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Integrating banking plus tech equals solving real problems. Mr. Victor Asemota. Thank you, sir.
I was telling the MD just now that they didn't send me the memo that people were going to come here with hoodies and jeans. So when I came overdressed. I thought I was coming for the iPhone launch. You know, this is quite impressive. You know, it's the first time I'm actually seeing something like this in Nigeria. So, Rotus actually introduced me just now as a technology person. You know, I don't see myself as a technology person. I actually see myself as a product person. Each time, you know, I tell my family members I'm in technology, they try telling me about their computers that they want to fix. So, you know, I'm not technology, I'm actually a product person. And I looked at the title of this program. You know, it was banking plus tech equals solving real problems. And I decided to make a slight correction, you know, based on my experience. It's actually banking plus tech plus people, not banking plus tech alone. And I'll explain, you know, as time goes on. Okay? One of the most abused words in both banking and technology is innovation. But what does it really mean? Okay? It's just solving human problems with tools and processes. Tools, processes, and people. That's all. Next slide, please. The wonderful people at Harvard, you know, even went further to define it. 3 types of innovation. You have efficiency innovations, sustained innovations, and disruptive innovations. Now, the most okay, thank you. So the most important of all the types of innovation is actually the disruptive innovation. And it's also the most misunderstood. People think disruption is about competition, about killing what exists. No. You know, you don't. It's actually a paradigm shift. I keep telling people, what will kill you sometimes doesn't look like you. What will probably replace banking in future will not look like banking at all. What exactly is banking? I keep telling people, my friends who are bankers, that banking is the oldest profession, and they take offense. You know, banking is actually one of the earliest things that human beings have started doing. The MD just now mentioned that FirstBank was actually the first incorporated entity in Nigeria. What does that tell you? The very first company that was incorporated was a bank in Nigeria. So it's actually a solution to address human banking itself is an innovation. You know, and banking has transitioned over time. Bill Gates keeps saying that people need banking, they don't need banks. Banking moved from being a place that people go to what people do. And it has transitioned now to something much different. It's something that people experience. It's not even what you do anymore, it's an experience. Next slide. So, I swear I did not coordinate this with Chuma, because the Brazil story that he told is very, very interesting, but I'm actually going to talk about, another Brazil story of my own. So I'm going to give you, 3 stories from my experience around the world about innovation in financial services. The first story is from Ghana. Next slide. Now, this is a bittersweet story because this company is dead. It was called Maza Health, and I was actually on the board. We were providing transportation, emergency healthcare transportation to pregnant women in the village. That was the initial premise. The founder, she was a medical doctor herself. It was a not-for-profit organization, and it was backed by USAID and a lot of other international donor organizations. Now, one of the things that shocked me, is also something I have learned in the last couple of years, that the greatest ideas do not come from for-profit organizations. And at Maza, while looking at the data, I discovered, some things in financial services that I did not even expect. For each pregnant woman, they were supposed to pay 20 Ghana cedis for the service, to allow them use the transport service at any time for antenatal care, for taking them to the hospital to give birth. And a lot of them could not pay this. Initially, the founder said, okay, it was because of poverty. I said, no, I don't think that's the case. Look at the data properly. We're surprised that the women still paid even after they gave birth. It was unusual. They didn't have to pay, but they did. So, and, that told us that something else was happening. All these women, we did it for 2 districts in rural Ghana, all these women were farmers. And, farming is cyclical. It was seasonal. They only paid when they had money to pay after the harvest. And it was interesting that a lot of them stored their value as food. They didn't use cash at all. A lot of the transactions in those 2 districts were actually by barter. Okay, I need plantain, you have yam. They didn't need cash. So when people keep talking about unbanked, I keep asking myself, how are you going to bank somebody who doesn't even use cash? We keep forgetting one thing, that cash is a very, very big risk. Once you convert your goods from farm products to cash, you can lose it very easily. So it was actually easier for them to leave their products as cash, and they were not getting good deals from the commodity traders. So they would also wait till the time they got the best deal before they converted the food crops to cash, usually at harvest time when they have an excess. And that was how, they lived there. And this was something that, all of the other research in financial services could not have told me. We found out from a healthcare startup called Maza. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. The other country is Brazil. And the largest fintech in Brazil is called NuBank. Very interesting startup. I met them at the Google Launchpad program in 2017. They had started in 2013. No, they were actually founded in 2013, but they actually started operations in 2014. As at the time they came to Launchpad, they were already valued at over $2 billion. So, next slide, please. The founder, David, he was actually an investor before with Sequoia Capital. And he kept seeing a lot of things coming through him. And these guys were not really, addressing the real problem in Brazil. So he decided to fix it by himself and started NuBank. Next slide, please. NuBank's growth was phenomenal. By 2017, when they came to Launchpad, they had 3 million customers. 3 million customers actively using their product. But what was interesting was that they had 11 million customers on the wait list. And I asked them why they didn't onboard 11 million customers. They said they didn't have the capacity to serve them. And I asked them, okay, why, the demand for their product was very high. And, they asked me another question back. If I lose my card, with a normal bank, what happens? I told them, well, you know what, I'll call the bank, I'll tell them, my name and everything, they replace it. Oh, I said, okay, great. And now told me, okay, you know what, when a NuBank customer calls that they've lost a card, the first thing they want to know is what exactly the customer was trying to do when that card was lost. They first solve that problem. After they've solved the problem, they can now find out if the customer is distressed. Do you need transportation to get out of the situation where you're in? After that, before they now find a way to send the card to the person. So their primary focus is customer service. It wasn't even about, they are one product institution. As at that time, they were one product institution. They had only one credit card. And the service was that good. They had zero marketing. What happened was they had raised money as the collateral obligation for lending. To be able to raise debt, you needed to have, some equity too as well. So they didn't even have money to spend on marketing. But they had 3 million customers onboarded and 11 million waiting to be onboarded. It was totally insane. I had never seen anything like that before. And their customer service center had about 3,000 people working there. Not all staff, most of them temps. And I realized what I had also seen before, in the telco space. This is something that, a lot of people do not actually realize. People think it's actually the technology that people buy. No, it's not the technology people buy. It's empathy that people buy. MTN, we implemented mobile money for them in about 13 countries. We did Vodafone in 2 countries. We've worked with Huawei on a number of implementations also in Nigeria too as well. And of all these implementations, something I realized was that the best of all of them had a very, very large back office. And the best was actually in Uganda. Uganda, they had this team called the public access team, more like customer service too as well, like NuBank. I think there were about 2,000 people in their public access team at MTN Uganda. It was actually also the fastest growing scheme I'd ever seen in Africa too as well, just as fast as NuBank. Now, if you look at NuBank's numbers, they also tell you another story too as well. I asked David why, they decided on the product that they decided, and it was actually a very, very simple choice. globally, if you look at the profit pools that exist already in banking, if you look at it by customer segment, personal banking is where most banks in the world, personal banking and SME, that's where they make the most of their money from. Lending is actually the most profitable activity in banking. So what they did was just, okay, look at Brazil. Largest potential customer segment was people under 29. And they provided them just one product with superior customer service. And that was it. So, there's something that I learned while I was at school in England. The very, very first day in class, the professor told us something, that all core competence over time becomes a threshold competence. What NuBank just did is to prove that right. Banking had already existed before. Banks were already doing what they were doing. But, they just took it to another level. There's nothing disruptive about this. They just made it a lot more efficient. Sorry, next. Now, Nigeria. This is a shameless plug. I actually started this company. It's called Omni Branches. Now, the agent story in Nigeria is actually a very, very interesting one. As Chuma's presentation just now spoke about all the numbers of agents all over Nigeria, but there's a story that probably a lot of people have not heard about, how the agency business in Nigeria became the bank business, not necessarily the mobile financial services company's business. Sometime in 2014, we did an experiment in collaboration with Total. Total had a lot of cash at their gas stations, and they didn't know what to do with it. So Total decided they needed a partner who would help them use the cash. So the thing we did was, at first, to aggregate all of the mobile payment companies, because I had seen from some work that we did in the past with the telcos that each of those mobile financial services companies did not have the clout, did not have the capacity to actually serve the market with their own agent network. What was interesting was we also integrated about 5 banks, that most of the transactions were actually coming from the banks, not the mobile financial services companies. One of the banks decided also to provide us with a back office. They had people there, to solve all the issues of the agents and all of that. And strangely, there was a guy at Alakbere who was doing 4 million naira in transactions daily. So we looked at the guy, found out this guy was just basically a human ATM. People will come with cards, swipe it, and he collect money. So it was now obvious to us that was the business model. So we took out all the mobile financial services companies that now decided to work with the banks. So, of course, this is something that we also need to address in a summit like this. When you are working with banks, sometimes you get swallowed too as well. Some of the banks we were working with decided they could do this by themselves, so they kicked us out. So they decided to do it by themselves. So this year, USAID and Shell Foundation came to us. They now told us that, look, the people in the rural areas where In fact, solar is also, another story entirely. Solar is actually the solution to our electricity problem in Africa, even though we don't know it yet. We have 98 million homes in sub-Saharan Africa alone, off-grid. And most of them are buying these solar products at breakneck speed. So we looked at, the solar space, and I realized that, there was a massive collections problem, and decided to solve it, using the same agent infrastructure that we had done before with Total. So we started this in April. Compared to Chuma's numbers, these are quite small. But, I'm actually very, very impressed, because if you look at all of these guys, these are people in some of the poorest areas, doing almost 100 million naira a day in transactions for solar. This is probably the thing I'm the proudest of this year. And something I discovered about this, which really, really gladdened my heart. The back office for Omni branches is a multilingual back office. We discovered that, there are people there who speak Hausa, because, you have agents who only speak Hausa. So how are you going to now serve them, with somebody in the back office speaking English, speaking Yoruba, speaking all sorts of language, even the interface for the products. We're actually changing it to actually make it Hausa and, all of the local languages too as well. At the end of the day, what I've learned over time is that, we're actually serving people. No matter the technology we've deployed, it's people that matter. Both Ghana, Brazil, Nigeria, what has made the difference is people actually solve. Technology is just a tool. The institutions and the technology are also just tools. It's just people solving people's problems. Now, there's one word I really, really, really hate hearing. When I keep hearing that, okay, people are unbanked, the example I gave with the woman at Maza, her bank, she already has a bank. Her bank is her farm. There's nobody that can actually provide something better than that for her. She doesn't use cash, because she doesn't need it. And the Northern Ghana experience also now taught me a lesson. And I also understood why it was easy for people in East Africa to move from cashless to things like mobile payments, because it was just a jump. And some of the narratives people give about, oh no, send money home to mama, it is. I looked at the transactions in M-Pesa. The largest M-Pesa corridor was actually Nairobi to Nairobi. I looked at the average transaction size, was over $50. I told them, look, this is not a send money home to mama scenario. These are actually these are value chain settlements. And if you look at the NuBank example earlier, when they decided to focus on lending and SME, in Kenya alone, most of the lending is actually done by cooperatives. In Nigeria, there's a lot of informal lending that already happens, just that it's not recorded. The trader value chain, there's much more lending happening in there than the entire financial services sector. But we're not looking at that. We're looking at the regular suspects. So I think the job here for both fintech and banking is to actually look at what people really do, find out what they really need, and provide them with services to actually solve their problems. Thank you very much.
For Mr. Victor Asemota, thank you. Very, 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 very insightful discussion there about what needs to be done. We're not going to go into a Q&A session with Mr. Asemota. So if you have a question, do raise your hand. I will come to you and you can ask him. Please have your questions, because if you don't, I've told you how much I admire the man. I'll take over the Q&A session myself. I already got like 50 in my head. So, let's make it interactive. If you do have a question, do raise your hand and we'll talk about how things can be improved in the financial sector as far as financial technology is concerned with fintechs, and how FirstBank can help with that. So do indicate your question. Okay, I see someone there has a question, so I'll be right with you. Thank you for joining us, ma'am. Please state your name and your question. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mrs. Ono. I'm the founder of Smarter Grid International. Mine is not just a question, it's actually to buttress what you have said about actually bringing real solutions to people. My experience with the banks is that they don't really like to help small people, small businesses, but when you aggregate the monies that come from there, is a lot more money than what is in the banks. So I recall about your Omni branches, and I don't know if you know that my company was used to test your Omni branches initiative, right, with the Swifta, yeah. So you said that is people plus banking and fintech, but I want to add something to it as well. It's actually energy, people, banking, and fintech. So the reason is that energy is everything. So we can't really achieve much without energy. I know that the FirstBank have decided to take this initiative to reach out to the people and bring banking closer to the people. But I can't understand how they intend to do that if there is no renewable energy in the mix. So we have done our own part in trying to solve problems, like what you're doing right now, So that is, we manufacture solar-powered kiosks for the small business owners and the agents, and we're doing this for the banks and the telcos as well. So this is a great opportunity to talk about this, because a lot of banks, at first when you approach them with this, they're very they don't really understand how this can help them, because they're looking for big deposits. But now that the banks have decided to start looking for small deposits, we're right here in front of you to help you do that. So I don't believe that you want to open branches in the villages, because of course it's going to be too expensive to run, right? So we have small banks for you, which is the kiosk that has energy, has solar-powered kiosks, KYC machines, solar-powered. Everything that you need to run a bank is actually embedded in the kiosk with very smart technology devices that allow you to deal with your agents without even having to go there. Cash in, cash out is very easy. Through Omni branches, they can monitor all your agents. You don't need to keep looking for where's Mr. This, Mr. That. No, because the technology that we have is already powered, and you can do all of that. So the banks need to actually be more open-minded, and then they need to really look at the problems of the people and help to solve these real problems, not just big deposits. So I'm with you, Omni branches, and if you want to talk, we're right here.
Thank you very much. I didn't intend for this to have become an advertising session for Omni branches, but thank you very much. Because it's interesting, two telcos, this is amazing. From the field, the guys saw what was happening in the field. They came to us and said we should white label it for them. And it's not, for me, I believe it's a testament to actually providing what people really, really need. Because they said, look, you know what? They have their solutions out there, but people are not using them. What are you guys doing right that people are using? Why are people using your product? I just told them, look, because we designed it for the people, rather than for ourselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your response, Mr. Asemota. By the way, SMEs, this is a perfect time to plug SME Connect from FirstBank. If you've got solutions, you need funding, the booth is back there. So make sure that when we do the breakout session, you go speak with SME Connect. Yes? Okay, please state your name and your question.
My name is Collins from Digits and Data, a fintech in Ghana. The case you pinpointed about Maza, I would like to ask you your opinion. Why do you think it failed? And if we are looking to replicate such an idea in the rest of Africa, what should we do right? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very, very simple question. It was not for profit, and the founder got tired. She had a life, A medical doctor in America earns a lot of money, For her, it was even more tragic. Both her parents died 1 month after the other. So she was under a lot of pressure, and she needed to have a life. So and once the founder is no longer there, the person with the vision pushing everything, that's it. For me, I believe that, it's actually easy to replicate it, because if you go to the site, mazatransport.org, she's put everything there. In fact, what happened was, when we were even winding down, we were looking for people to give the remainder of our grants to, to actually replicate this thing. A lot of things that people don't realize is, if you look at Google, Facebook, all of the large tech companies in this world today, they're actually riding on open source tools. So we want to actually open source, what we did at Maza Health. So for other people to actually do things like that. So if you're interested, let me know. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Asemota. We have another question here. Please state your name and your question. Thank you.
My name is Remi Odusi. It's interesting that you mentioned M-Pesa. And I think in Nigeria, this change is actually upon us. Maybe we don't really realize it. MTN recently got a mobile banking license. I would like to know your views. What are the implications for businesses, for SMEs, the opportunities that we should see, the kind of disruptions that have been seen elsewhere, so that we can all prepare for it? Thank you.
Correction, MTN did not get a mobile banking license. They actually got a super agent license. Because a lot of people in the media have been misrepresenting that fact. Telcos, in general, I keep telling people this, and if there's any regulator here, I'll repeat it all over again. See, I've worked with them for over 2 decades now. I was part of, my family members invested in a telco. We used to own 10% of Airtel Nigeria when it was Econet Wireless Nigeria. I've worked with MTN now for over 15 years. What people don't understand with telcos, a telco is not in the mobile payments business to make money. They're there to reduce churn. They're actually there to actually solve the problem of their customer and keep them. If you don't keep your customer, you're not going to make money. So the money they started making in mobile payments was incidental. If the M-Pesa story is funny because Vodafone did not discover, that. Mobile money as a term was actually something that MTN and Standard Bank had started in South Africa. They actually had a collaboration, and that company was called Mobile Money. In Kenya, SwiftaCorp just observed what was already happening. People were actually sending airtime to themselves and cashing it out again as money at the other end, and they decided to actually provide them a solution to do that. So it's not like they woke up one day that they were going to now disrupt the financial services sector. No, that wasn't how it happened. But because of their ubiquity, and because, if you look at the agent model, it's actually already in airtime. So it was actually easy for them to switch over from the same airtime agents to financial services too as well. And, in Nigeria, I think MTN, understands the informal sector much more than other people. Even as Econet, when we started, we were building our own distribution network. We're actually building Econet centers, and a stupid mistake we made. MTN looked at the guy selling Indomie in the streets, followed the guy up to Okari, and made the guy at Okari their super dealer. So they understood how retail really, really worked in Nigeria. And that's why the money we're spending building, we're spending about, I think, 185 million naira per, service center. We're wasting money on all of that. But they didn't need to spend money on distribution. Instead, they redirected that money and started using it for infrastructure. So that's how they really, really won Nigeria. When we were focusing on Lagos, they went to the east. So the Igbo man who we had sold the Econet phone to in Lagos, at Christmas, when he went to the east, found out MTN was working, also got an MTN phone. By the time he came back to Lagos, MTN was also working in Lagos too as well. So that's how we now started having, multiple phones in Nigeria. They already had the coverage. They had, deep knowledge of the informal sector, and that's how, they were able to win. And I don't think there's anything really, really special about it other than they were able to raise a lot of money. And the only way you raise a lot of money is when you are proving that you can actually do it. So it's something anybody here can also do as well. Thank you.
Great question.
Looking at the ecosystem, if 95% of financial inclusion, I'm looking at the component of an ecosystem, in which renewable energy is a component. 95% of financial inclusion, there should be 5% on the residual. I'm looking about the residual right now. When you talk about innovation, it talks about efficiency, sustainable, disruptive. The 5%, could we have an element of disruptive? I'm looking in a component of financial inclusion. And again, you talked about economic growth. Particularly when it talks about economic growth, there's a substantial in economic growth for efficiency, profitability. Mine is a question with a comment. Thank you.
I don't really understand the question and comment.
Could you be more specific, because you mentioned the 95% financial inclusion and energy and stuff like that. Can you just try to make it more specific?
Okay, very simple. In an ecosystem, component of an ecosystem, 100% assumed to be a composition of ecosystem. There's 95%. The remaining 5% in a financial inclusion. Could you just put an analogy to it?
I'm still not sure I even got the question myself. I'm struggling as well, but Mr. Asemota, please do your best. Do your best. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your question.
Okay. So if I understand you right, okay, I'll use banking as it currently happens as an example. I think there's a bank that published their results once. We found out that about 80% of their revenue actually comes from about 400 customers. Okay, is that what you're referring to?
We hope so. Let's just assume that's what he's referring to, and just
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Now there's actually tremendous potential. Each time, like I said, in the last slide, we should kill this deficit narrative. Last week I was at Ashesi University, in Ghana. They had a foundation meeting, so we're all there. And for the first time, there were some people from America who were visiting the university. First thing one of them told me was that, she was so impressed with the confidence of the students. Ashesi is like one of the best universities, in Africa. And she kept telling us that, look, what she hears outside Africa is the story of poverty, the story of crime, the story, that shouldn't be what defines us. Each day I look at the Only Branches, dashboard, each of those transactions represents somebody who's trying to survive, somebody who's doing something, to create something. Now, we may not have the numbers of NuBank or FirstBank right now, but those numbers will come. Those numbers were numbers we got between April and October, And what did we just do? Change things a bit. Focus on one product, solar energy. Make sure we, serve the agents properly so that the agents can actually serve the customers. Provide them, support in the languages that they're used to. That's all. I believe that's all it takes. Just find out what people really need. Like in the case of Ghana with Mother Health, for us, we thought we were doing good. We just went there. Yes, we saved a lot of lives in the process. Because what we discovered initially was a lot of the maternal mortality was due to the fact that people were having children at home. So by the time we closed down Maza, most of the people in that district were having children in the hospitals. So we're actually enable behavioral change. But the most important thing to me was what I discovered about how those people use money and how they store value. It was an epiphany. No financial inclusion solution is going to help somebody, or is going to, get somebody banked if the value that they have is in the farm. Their value is not cash. So, we're just wasting our time. Until we understand what people need, we're not going to get there. Thank you.
Contribution. We recently developed, 2 years ago, we developed what we call Money Mall. Money Mall is a fintech web-based platform that will enable people that are looking for credit and banks or people that can provide them with that credit. We've tried a couple of times, discussed with the Chartered Institute of Bankers, and tried to present this to the body of bank CEOs. Because most of the banks we go to will say, I want it to be my product. And we see this cannot be one bank's product, just like the FirstBank is talking about the API infrastructure. Because what that does is that a customer that needs a facility will just go to our website and provide all the information you need to provide. If we have the bank acceptance criteria, we send it to that bank. So what you now see is that it will reduce the cost of you having account officers running around the whole country, and also a customer that is looking for a bank. And I want to say, if FirstBank is ready, we are ready to give you this platform, but not as something for FirstBank alone, but this is what the industry needs, so that you can reduce just running around looking for customer. Meanwhile, this is somebody that has a facility waiting for you. So that's one thing. Then the second thing is that most of the things you are talking about is payment platform, deposit and all those kind of things. How else can, maybe they talk about, can we work together with Money Mall and maybe some of the fintech solutions that you have to see that this is launched for the banking sector and to help the customers? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The first question or first comment or question, that you raised was a very, very, a good one. I think one of the best things that happened after people realized that, Safaricom had a monopoly, in Kenya, was to actually remove agent exclusivity, because Safaricom was actually tying up, the entire agent network, in Kenya with their clouds, okay? Now, as for your relationship with banks, like I mentioned earlier that first time we partnered with a bank, when the guys found out that they could do it, it's business. You understand what I'm saying? If they can do it, you are just another cost layer, okay? Now, so it depends on what your value proposition really is. Now, for Omni branches, this morning I actually saw the mail I wrote to my team. Now, the initial idea I had was very, very different from what it became, because we kept iterating, as we went along. When the whole talk of agent banking came up, first thing I did was look at total number of bank branches in Nigeria. FirstBank obviously has the largest number. I asked myself one question: why should I go to my bank's branch to do a transaction? Why can't I do a transaction from any bank branch, in Nigeria? You understand what I'm saying? So, and spoke to a couple of bankers. Oh no, like if you do that, no, people do not want people to be in their banking hall. I said, no. You forget that this is actually reciprocal. People that would have come to my banking hall will go to the bank branch and closest to them. Oh no, about branding and all of that. I said, no, this is actually logical. If other people come to your bank, it's like an ATM. Other people come to use your ATMs. The fact that an ATM is branded FirstBank doesn't mean that only FirstBank cards will work there. And we had this conversation, so I was actually, that was the solution we wanted to launch. We actually called it Omniterra, at any bank branch. So the first bank we talked to said, no, they want a monopoly. I said, no, it doesn't support our business model. For us to do this properly, we need to work with everybody. You understand what I'm saying? So I know where you're coming from, As for the second question, yes, you're right. The slide I showed about global profit pools for banking. If you look at the smallest profit pool is actually payments. Banks shouldn't even be doing payments. You understand what I'm saying? Banks should be doing things like lending, doing things like corporates, and all of the other things. Payments is, if you look at, there's Barclays and there's Barclaycard. Barclaycard is a payments company. It's not a bank. But for some reason, in our part of the world, people feel that the profit pools are actually in payments. But because we don't have enough data to do things like lending and all of that. And I also understand because you need the payments data eventually, to also start doing lending and providing all the other services. So we'll get there eventually. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Asemota. I'm so sorry. I know we said that was the last question, but we have just one final question. From
and I was fortunate to spend some time with Mr. Asemota yesterday at the FirstBank session. My question is around the topic that we have today, which is banking plus technology, solving real problems. One of the real problems small businesses face in day-to-day industry is getting the loans. And there is a word I would request the management team to ban in your banks, which is collateral. when we are talking about growth capital, is about giving capital to a company that deserves, that is working towards growth. But when you say bring capital, that means you are giving capital to only someone who already has it in another format called asset. So it doesn't really, it's not really growth capital. So I would like to ask, since lending is one of the major capital pool for banks, where they earn from, and what are the different ways you have observed in various countries, how creditworthiness is being assessed in alternative methods rather than just looking at the collateral?
Thank you very much. Yeah, a friend of mine who works with Visa, said something, we're having dinner one day and, she said it, and I didn't quite realize it before. She was asking me why we had so many expensive cars in Nigeria. And I said, okay, well, people just like good things. So as the discussion progressed, we now realize that in a place without credit bureaus, the easiest way for you to prove that you're creditworthy is to show that you're creditworthy. So that was her observation. You're right. It's a pain. Okay. What NuBank did in Brazil, a lot of people are also trying to do it here. Carbon, what was the name of the other? Mines. And interestingly, most of their data comes from one source. And that source is InterSwitch. So InterSwitch has been there, for a very, very long time. InterSwitch sells airtime, they do payments, they do government collections, they do everything. Because they've been doing all of this, they have all of that data. Now, the banks have also, look at FirstBank, 125 years in existence. Problem is, most of that data is probably analog. How do you get all of that? Now, they have a chief data officer, so that's probably going to be a very, very challenging job. And if FirstBank can do it, I'm sure other people, will copy FirstBank. Like issuing cards instantly at the branch, that's fantastic. In the past, I used to wait weeks before I get my card sent to me. Somebody now told me, wait a minute, why are you killing yourself? FirstBank does it. So and we opened a FirstBank account and we got our cards, and I was blown away. Now, one of the things people do not realize, FirstBank launched the first ATMs in Nigeria. FirstBank, in fact, the first internet banking platform in Nigeria was actually launched by FirstBank. And I know because we did the first security assessment for, because they were so concerned with, okay, look, we're doing this thing for the first time, new banking platform, come break it, come check, to see if this thing, is strong enough. And we went there, and, I was actually quite impressed. Now, between 2001, and this is now 2019, this is almost 18 years now, a lot has happened. But when it comes to lending to small business, no bank has moved. And I think the biggest problem there is actually data. Then the second problem is, actually also understanding how small businesses work. I don't think even the guys who are currently doing lending now even understand their customers, because they don't understand things like cash cycles. In Kenya, it's interesting. People were taking money and using it for sports betting. Sort of defeats the purpose. So the guy who uses that money for sports betting is probably not the person you should be lending to. And, something that happened in Kenya that caught my eye, there's a small company called Pesesha. They aggregate cooperatives. As we're looking at the different types of cooperatives, there are, I think, for transport cooperatives alone in Kenya, there are about 4,000 transport cooperatives. Most of the cash, in Kenya is actually with cooperatives. Call them SACCOs. We now realize that cooperatives could also lend to other cooperatives. People could actually lend to people. So that's something that's going to grow like wildfire. And, it's, I would say I'm sorry for the banks, but, at the end of the day, if the banks are not in it now, because it's something the banks are not even seeing yet. The same thing with informal lending that already happens in Nigeria. If you actually look at all those trade groups, they're already cooperatives. So lending already happens, but it's just not in the way that we think. If you also look at even Indians in Nigeria, I have 2 Indian friends at Mega Plaza. The first funding they got to start their business was 40 million naira given to them by their relatives. And it was a loan. The first funding I got to start my business was also a loan from my family, and I paid back. So it's already happening. So I think for first-time entrepreneurs, for a lot of people in the informal sector, some interesting solutions, will come up soon. Thank you.
Round of applause again for Mr. Victor Asemota, founder of Swifta Systems. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for answering all the